i ponent que celebrem a la Facultat de Geografia i Història de la Universitat de Barcelona. Vull agrair l'assistència dels presents, també els que ho fan online, i molt especialment el suport tant del vicerrectorat de política d'internacionalització de la UB, el vicerrector no pot ser amb nosaltres, del degà de la Facultat de Geografia i Història, el doctor Piqueras, que ens acompanya, i de la Fundació Institut Confuci de Barcelona. Ens acompanya també el professor Min Chou, que és director local de l'Institut Confuci. Bé, primer li demanaré al professor Min Chou que intervingui i a continuació ho farà el professor Piqueras com a degà de la facultat. Professor Chou, sisplau.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buen día a todos, buenos días a todos. Bueno, en primer lugar, en nombre de la Fundación Instituto Confucio de Barcelona, agradezco al Vicerrectorado de la Política de Internacionalización de la UB, grupo de CEIPAC de la Facultad de Geografía e Historia de la UB, por vuestra excelente iniciativa de promover el estudio de Asia en el campus de la UB. Y de esta gran disposición y la magnífica tarea que han hecho y sigue haciendo, nace hoy la primera jornada académica de Historia de Asia y Poniente, y felicito sinceramente a la organización de la jornada, y particularmente al doctor Javier Orduña, pues vuestra sabiduría de promover la comprensión a Asia y a China mediante su origen histórico. Como todos sabemos, conocer a China es una tarea de larga duración, llena de retos, pero es interesante y atractiva, porque Cataluña necesita conocer a este gigante asiático que está produciendo cada día su influencia y su impacto en todos los ámbitos en el escenario mundial, sobre todo en el siglo XXI. Esta necesidad viene de las constantes actividades institucionales, económicas, empresariales, culturales y académicas entre dos continentes, Cataluña, España, la Unión Europea y China. Un excelente conocimiento mutuo nos da y dará seguro un resultado más fructífero en el intercambio y la comprensión mutua y la comprensión humana de ambas partes. Para esta misión de la comunicación humana, la Fundación de Instituto Confucio de Barcelona está dispuesta a colaborar con todo tipo de difusión de conocimiento y la cultura china en Cataluña y el resto de la península ibérica. Y también con los debates, las reflexiones sobre China, de su historia y su actualidad. Hoy, esta primera jornada académica es un excelente ejemplo de la iniciativa de promover la comprensión académica y profundizar el acercamiento humano de los grandes pueblos que tienen una larga historia, aunque con las culturas muy diferentes. La Fundación de Instituto Confucio de Barcelona es una entidad sin ánimo lucrativo afincada en la ciudad condal, además está cerca de la UB, con la UB y Casa Asia como socios locales y la Universidad de Estudios Internacionales de Pekín como socio chino para promover precisamente la comprensión y el acercamiento de China a Cataluña mediante la enseñanza de la lengua y la cultura china y en colaboración con diferentes instituciones, centros docentes catalanes. Esperamos que los académicos, los investigadores y los profesores de la UB y de Cataluña pongan su interés académico y o profesional en China y que conozcan más a China mediante la Fundación Instituto Confucio de Barcelona, que es ese puente inicial rumbo a la China, que físicamente está lejos de aquí, pero acercamiento lingüístico, cultural y profesional siempre depende de nuestra voluntad y nuestro conocimiento. Y esta jornada ya es un buen ejemplo de este interés y de esta voluntad. y la parte china siempre tiene la puerta abierta, y también los académicos chinos también seguro tienen sus intereses académicos en Cataluña. Por tanto, hoy también hay profesores invitados que han vivido a China y están aquí. Yo creo que con esta primera jornada deseamos que en la UB, o en la Universidad de Barcelona, se genera un interés permanente en el estudio chino, en el estudio asiático, y genera un intercambio académico e investigador con los académicos chinos, con los académicos del resto de la península ibérica y de los investigadores y estudiosos y profesionales de la Unión Europea. Bueno, al final de toda mi palabra, reitero mi felicitación a los organizadores y muy buena jornada. Muchas gracias. Javier, no ha abierto su micrófono.
Vale, ¿ahora me oyes? Bueno, reitero mi agradecimiento al Instituto Confucio por el soporte y la ayuda que ha prestado. Ahora explicaremos el perfil de la jornada con la presencia de los profesores Günther y de los profesores de la Universidad de Barcelona. En cualquier caso, es verdad, es lo que dices, es una iniciativa que debería tener una continuidad, y agradecemos en cualquier caso vuestro apoyo. Le pido ahora que intervenga al profesor Ricard Piqueras, decano de la Facultad de Geografía e Historia de la Universidad de Barcelona, que es nuestro anfitrión y nos ha facilitado todo para que podamos celebrar esta reunión.
Muchas gracias. Buen día a tots i totes, benvinguts, bienvenidos, especialmente a los profesores que nos visitan de fuera, el profesor Sven Günther de la Universidad Normal de Changchun y la doctora Sven Günther de la Universidad de Bayern en Alemania, bienvenidos. El profesor Jordi Pérez, el profesor Diego Solá, el profesor Laia Manonellas, todos los que van a intervenir durante la jornada de hoy. Agradecer a los organizadores del evento, el Instituto Confucio, el profesor Chou, encantados, como siempre, de colaborar. La Facultad de Geografía e Historia ya llevamos años colaborando afortunadamente con nuestros vecinos del Raval, el Instituto Confucio, y realmente es un placer inaugurar jornadas de este tipo. Normalmente llevo 5 años de decano y he tenido afortunadamente que inaugurar muchos congresos, seminarios, etcétera. Y siempre es un placer cuando inauguro, por ejemplo, pues el 4º congreso de no sé qué, el 5º, el 10º, estupendo, ¿no? Porque tiene una continuidad y son eventos que se han consolidado, ¿no? En este caso es la primera jornada y tiene doble importancia, ¿no? Porque significa que por primera vez no sé, personas que han pensado que valía la pena organizar una jornada académica sobre un tema determinado, en este caso las historias de Asia y Poniente, las relaciones con el mundo asiático y especialmente con China. Ni que decir tiene la importancia que tiene China hoy en día en todos los ámbitos, no solamente económico, y realmente yo creo que en nuestra universidad, la Universidad de Barcelona, y en esta Facultad de Geografía e Historia, pues hay un potencial importantísimo, ¿no? de profesores, de alumnos que están interesados en trabajar temas de Asia y en concreto de cultura china, y por lo tanto me alegra muchísimo que esta jornada se haga evidentemente en esta Facultad de Geografía e Historia y no en la Facultad de Económicas, por ejemplo, ¿no? Bueno, seguramente también se hacen otros seminarios y otras jornadas, pero yo creo que no solamente por ser vecinos del Instituto Confucio, sino por el potencial humanístico que tenemos en nuestra facultad, ya digo, profesores como los que están aquí presentes y alumnos interesados, pues creo que estas relaciones y esta vinculación pues tienen un gran futuro. Y por eso estoy convencido de que esta primera jornada va a ser la primera de muchas otras jornadas que espero que impliquen un crecimiento exponencial de este interés de nuestros investigadores y nuestros alumnos por todos los temas asiáticos y en concreto por la cultura y la lengua chinas. Por lo tanto, bienvenidos, espero que disfruten al máximo de esta jornada, que será muy provechosa. Y nada más, mucha suerte. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, decano, muchas gracias, director Chou. Pues podemos dar paso ya a la primera sesión de la jornada. Y insisto, muchas gracias por el apoyo que nos han prestado y por la asistencia continua, y confiamos ahora que esto sirva para... Sea el primer paso, como dice el decano, es crear una costumbre es realmente complicado. Entonces, ojalá sea el momento de la creación de una costumbre. Muchas gracias. Entonces le pido al profesor Günther que se incorpore. Bé, ja hem comentat el perfil de la sessió que ens uneix. Val a dir que l'origen d'aquesta reunió han estat els contactes que el professor Günther, des de Changchun, que és una ciutat que està més a prop de Seül i de Vladivostok que de Pequín, ben lluny, a l'est. Va tenir ja fa uns anys la iniciativa de posar-se en contactes amb estudiosos de Barcelona, amb el professor Remesal, a qui agraeixo molt com ens ha recolzat en aquesta organització, amb el CSIC, i hi va haver un primer contacte que es va celebrar en una altra facultat, gràcies també al concurs del professor Marcos, i en aquell moment va sortir aquesta possibilitat de continuar una experiència que permetés descobrir des de Barcelona els punts de contacte que hi ha i les ocasions de treballar i d'investigar que hi ha amb la Xina i amb universitats de la Xina. El professor Günther és un professor europeu, alemany, que treballa a la Xina, que és catedràtic en aquesta universitat, de la Universitat del Nord-est de la Xina, de Changchun, de la Normal del Nord-est de la Xina, com ha dit el degà, i la nostra intenció era, en una facultat que, com ha dit el degà, ja sobresurt en el treball amb la Xina, gràcies al treball del CEIPAC, no directament a la Xina, sinó amb les rutes, amb el comerç, que després ja a la tarda sentirem el professor Jordi Pérez, amb el professor Diego Sola, que ha treballat també relacions diplomàtiques amb la Xina, i la professora Laia Manonelles, que ens sentirem aquesta tarda, que aprofitar aquest caliu, i agraïm a tots que s'hagin incorporat, per fer veu, per demostrar, per plantejar les ocasions de col·laboració que hi ha en aquest terreny. I al llarg de la sessió ja tindrem ocasió de parlar-ne. Llavors, li vam demanar al professor Günther que preparés aquesta, i a la doctora Günther, que és arqueòloga, després la sentirem, a veure si podia preparar una sessió que obrís, diguem que permetés encabir aquesta mena de relacions i plantejar també les perspectives de col·laboració. Estem molt contents que el professor Günther ho ha pogut fer i que la sessió es fa finalment, perquè s'havia planejat per l'any 2020, no s'ha pogut celebrar fins ara. Well, and then, so, Professor Günther, I would give you the floor. The Professor Günther is full professor at the Northeastern Normal University in Changchun. He wrote his PhD about tax policy in ancient Rome, and he has been, and now among his fields is administration of Rome and empire, and numismatic. And I must say, you shouldn't miss Professor Günther's contributions online. No? There are several of them, so not a short number of YouTube lessons. And you can join them. You will appreciate the dynamics of our young colleague in Changchun. We are very happy to call him welcome in Barcelona, and we hope this will be further step leading to new steps later. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope you can all hear me very well. First, I would like to thank you, Xavier Odunya, but also Professor Zhou from the Confucius Institute, but also the faculty for Geography and History of the University of Barcelona and the Vice Rectorate for International Relations for inviting me, being somehow the representative of the Institute for the History of Ancient Civilizations that is located at Northeast Normal University in the northeast of China in Changchun. And I shall transfer the best greetings from our director, Professor Chan Chiang, who is very happy that we can be here with you and can build further contacts. And as contacts are built on gifts, of course, I also have a gift for the faculty, which is the Journal of Ancient Civilizations. That, of course, not only this volume we will contribute to your library to have the further exchange already established. Now, talking about exchange is the topic of my talk today. And as you can see, I want to access this from the socio-economic perspective, how China is viewed in ancient times up to modernity. And if we start with this topic, we must go to this person here, which you can see on a coin. The original I have here, and maybe Professor Odunya can distribute it among the audience. Of course, I would like to have it back because it is part of our institute's collection. And you might see here on the obverse, on the front side of the coin, a person with a long beard, with a diadem showing him like a Hellenistic ruler. But in fact, it is not a Hellenistic ruler. It's a Parthian king, Mithridates II. On the reverse, you have the very typical depiction on Parthian coins, where a warrior sits on a kind of throne, having a bow and arrow, so being about to shoot within rectangular brackets, where the legend is displayed. This person, Mithridates II, is in fact the one who established contacts between China and the West, since he, on the one hand, had the first contacts with Rome, with the commander Sulla, and also contacts with China, which is attested in several records in the Chinese, among the Chinese historians. And interestingly now, if you see that the first contacts came about with Anxi, which is ancient Parthia, you see the description here in the Hanshu, which is an ancient recording of the history of Han. And you might see that also this record is talking about how the coinage looks like. I read it out for you. The coins used here in Anchi are minted with silver, which is true, as you hopefully now can also see having it in your hand. On the wording side, so on the obverse, the image of the king is shown, and on the reverse side, the queen's face is shown. When a king dies, the coins are reminted. Now, can this be true? For this coin, surely not. This is a very standard coin of Mithridates II, but all the Parthian kings depicted in similar ways. And there is no queen. There is no queen on the reverse being shown. So this must relate to a very different coin. And we have such an exceptional coin type, which you see here, which is the only Parthian coin type where a queen is shown on the reverse, being the mother of a certain Parthian king called Phraatakis, and she is called Musa. And you see the style of this coin is also very different. It belongs to the time around the birth of Christ, so 2 BC to 84 roundabout. And Musa was now a queen, a former slave girl, being sent by the Emperor Augustus to the Parthian king, the predecessor of Phraatakis, and being married to him. And with this, you see that the report of the Hanshu must relate to this very exceptional coin where Queen Musa is shown. Now Queen Musa is depicted as a very hostile woman, killing all who want to take over the throne. So we will not delve further into this, but it shows how detailed the reports of ancient Chinese historians can be. Now, if we stay with this coin and look at another report of another historian in the Shuzhe, Sima Qian, who has written before the time of Augustus, you see that many of the details reported about Parthia are the same, but now, if we look at this report, we see the kingdom mints coin with silver and use their king's image on the coin. Upon the death of a king, the money is reminted with the image of the new king. So there is no mention of Queen Musa. So the former report of the Shuzhe is in fact relating to this kind of coins, being Mithridates II just an example of, and the Queen Musa coin, of course, was minted later, though the Shuzhe could not somehow, of course, describe this kind of coin. What we learn from this is we can really trust the reports of the Chinese historians, but of course we also must have a detailed look how these historians work, how do these historians think, how do they try to grasp certain ideas about the Western regions. Being transferred now to the West, we must also learn how the historians or any other kind of sources think and write about China. And this I want to do with you today. You see here a map, which is very typical, a map showing the contacts between West and East, or East and West, via the so-called Silk Roads. And of course, you see, this is very much detailed, but on the other hand, you see also how certain trade routes and contact routes might have functioned. For ancient times, however, now taking just one example, we have the so-called tabula Peutingeriana, being a map that goes back, in fact, to an ancient map, maybe into the time of Augustus, but at least in late antiquity, this was established. And we have in this map, China mentioned. I hope you can see it now. Here it's yellow marked. Sierra Mayor being really at the end of this very long stretched map that is nowadays in the Library of Vienna. So there seems to be not very much known about China, even in late antiquity, it seems. It's just put somewhere at the very end. If you look to more details of this map, you will see that there is Alexander mentioned. This is the place until where Alexander went to and then returned. So it seems to be really out of the reach, out of the imagination of the Romans. While when we look at the modern map, talking about the modern Silk Roads, you see how this network via sea and via land is functioning and how it relates China via the Eurasian corridor to the west and also to Spain eventually. So it's about perspectives. And these perspectives, of course, we have to take into consideration when we go into details about the ancient writings about China. So let's have a look at the earliest mentions of China in our records. In fact, these mentions start in Augustan times. There are probably contacts before, but they are not really and fully recorded. One might think in a report of Pliny the Elder from the 1st century AD, who mentions a certain author whom we cannot really date, that this might relate to the campaign of Pompey the Great, being sent to the east and fighting against Mithridates, the fourth of the Pontic kingdom, but we are not really sure about this. Yet it's very interesting to see that the poets of Augustan times frequently talk about the so-called Seres, the Seres people being now related to the most important product that was available in Rome at this time from the Seres, silk, serica. So Virgil, being an author well known, I think, to many of you in his Georgics, which is a work talking about agriculture, but in verses, shows us how the silk might come, might be produced, might be harvested. So they comb down the Seres, find tissues from their leaves, he asks. So he wants to show with this that there are very different products in the world outside Rome at this time, and he compares it with the products that Italy and Rome has at hand. So that's why he tries to bring it into the framework of agriculture. Now, if we look at Horace, his odes, you see it's a very different description. So it's now not about silk, but what is it about? I ask now the students here in the room. Maybe someone wants to say something. the description in Horace. You can shout, I think, into the room here. Elizabeth, what is it about? That's my privilege to ask my wife. Yes. So the framework is very different. It's now not about the textiles. It's about how powerful Augustus is, how powerful the Roman Empire is, because that's not that only the Parthians somehow are defeated, but even the Seres and Indians lying at the eastern shore, in the east somewhere, are somehow submitting to the Roman Empire, Jupiter being in the heaven ruling, and Augustus, of course, being on earth ruling at this time. So the framework for this Augustan poet, frequently mentioned in the series, Horace, is Rome is so powerful that even the most far-away nations submit to this strong Roman Empire with Emperor Augustus. So Virgil talking about textiles, Horace talking about the powerful Roman Empire. And another poet, Propertius, in his elegies, what is his thinking about the silk? I ask you. Yeah, it's about relief, relevant. So relaxing, luxury. Silk is not only something that you can wear, but even you have the silk to have some relief. So you have some luxurious time. So this is the third framework we have, talking now about the luxury goods, of which we will hear, I think, this afternoon very much more than I can say. Very often forgotten is a poem about the Actian War, which is only preserved on papyrus to us, and which is very fragmentary. So I just shortly mentioned it here. It is talking about the flight of Cleopatra, the success of Octavian, the later Augustus, against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. And in a passage, which is, you see, very fragmentary, 2 times the Seres are mentioned, the Seres people. Now, the exact details, the context, we cannot know, but it's very interesting to note that, again, the Seres are mentioned somehow with the Indians, the Indi. So they are somehow located also in the very east and shown being somehow together. Such geographical location of the Seres is not only present in the Augustan poets, but also frequently mentioned in other sources. So Florus, somehow living at the end of the 1st, beginning of the 2nd century, and writing an epitome, so a short version of Livy, very much focusing on the wars. He mentions at the end of his work, now Augustus being the ruler of the world, that again all the different nations come to Augustus and worship him somehow. There are the Scyths, there are the Sarmatians sending ambassadors to seek friendship, which means subordinating, in fact, to Rome, and also the Seres and also the Indians coming, now being described as very exotic. being very close to the sun, bringing elephants and gems and pearls, so everything luxurious we can somehow imagine. And of course, they have a very long journey coming to Rome, coming even from a very different climate. So Florus somehow is resembling this idea of the exotic people are, of course, far away. They have all these luxury products and they also live in a very different climate. However, there is not really something particular. So if you look at other descriptions of the Indians and other people, you will find very similar patterns. You will find similar topoi. So we cannot really grasp where these series are located and what's exactly their life about. Very shortly afterwards, we have the description of Strabo, a geographer, at several places in his works. He talks about India and the series, and then he also gives a description of how the region is structured geographically. He says, India has the shape of a rhombus, whose northern side is Mount Caucasus, beginning from Aria and stretching to its easternmost boundary. This mountain chain separates the Sakai, the Skyths and the Seres to the north and the Indians to the south. So he imagines that this is structured like a rhombus, where the people of the Seres people are located in the north and the Indians are located in the south. But if we look, for instance, in very shortly afterwards, geography, or better to say chorography, so talking about how the landscape is structured, of Pomponius Mela, writing in the times of Emperor Claudius, you see, it looks very different. So he describes that there are three different people. The first, whom we have encountered starting from the east, are the Indians. Then there are the Seres, and then the Skyths. The Seres inhabit in almost the middle part of the eastern side. The Indians and the Skyths, the furthermost parts, which means they are located on the one hand to the north and on the other hand to the south. And further description of the Seres, this is a race replete with justice. So they exercise justice and are very well known for their commercial activity, which proceeds in their absence with things left in the wilderness. So they somehow do silent trade, as it is called in research, and which we also find as a frequent topos, not only for the Seres, but for far away and far distant people. Now, how does this look like in their imagination? So let's first have a look at how Strabo thinks that the Seres are located, as you see here, hopefully on the map. You see the Caucasus somehow dividing everything, and the Seres and the Sakai and the Skythes being located to the north, and the Indians being then located to the south. But if we look how Pomponius Mela imagines the region, you see the Skythians are on the northern side, the Indians are on the southern part, and in the middle, the Seres people are located. So he has a totally different kind of geographical description and imagination. So one sees already that there is not really an exact geographical knowledge, but that they hear something about the Seres and try to bring it into their geographical perspective. Our most important source now is Pliny in his Natural History, talking about the series. Let's have a short look how the series are described, and maybe you will find again some of these topoi having been already mentioned by other authors from the Augustan times and Julio-Claudian times. So what kind of features of the series do we find in the text? You can just shout it in here. So what do you find? Which elements? Look at the students. Yeah, please. So what element do you see? No? Someone else?
So there is a contrast, right?
Yes, yes. So there is again, first of course, the silk. The silk is mentioned again. And somehow it's also like growing it again in the forest. So it seems to be related to plants. They comb it down, the floss. So it's very similar to what we read before from Virgil. What about the life of the Ceres people? Their society. They are mild. So this is in fact the same like exercising justice. And how about their trade activities? How about their trade? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Again, this silent trade. So they don't want to have contacts with people. They just are remote and just wait that the activity is transacted, but not talking very much, being always somehow distant. So you see, these features appear again and again and again. I could now talk 3 hours mentioning all the different sources. You would always see the same topoi appear. Yes, you have a question. Yeah, so they like wait from them. Exactly. So people come to them because they want to have the silk textiles. We will talk about this very soon. And they just have to do nothing. They just have to wait that the trade activity comes to them, and they don't also talk about this. It's just like very remote people living, in fact, a very peaceful life, not being disturbed also by this trade, which is also a very frequent topic in ancient Western literature. So if you are somehow remote, if you are not really touched by trade activities, of course, you do not have much luxury, and then you have not very much problems. The more luxury you have, the more moral problems arise. But this obviously is not for the Ceres people. So you see how ancient literature functions. And if we look now at other descriptions, we see that obviously there were contacts. And these contacts were trade related. So the 2nd century author Ptolemy, writing a geography, mentions a certain other author, Marinos, who has recorded that some merchants around Mes, Titianos, who did not himself go to the Ceres, being a Macedonian, sent his merchants to the series, and then he describes very much how long this took and how many kilometers there are, which I will not discuss here, but that would be an own topic. But that there is trade contacts, he clearly attests and relates it to a certain group around Titianos. And then, very interestingly, he doesn't talk about the series, but he talks now about the Sinai. The Sinai, later you already hear it, the term Chinese coming from, being somehow in a part of so-called Seriki, being located there. So he already has in mind that there is another denomination for these Chinese people, if I just shortly summarize it and bring it into a modern terminology. So he again locates it in the very east, but he has already some more information. Interestingly, in the Hu Hanshu, so the history of the later Han, we see that there is some evidence and that there is some attempt also to explore further contacts to the west in around that time. So end of the 1st century AD, beginning middle of the 2nd century AD. So you see there is exploration to the west by Gan Ying, and that there are several visits to places which we cannot discuss here due to the restriction of time, but that they have unusual products and produce unusual things, and that even then very far away distant kingdoms such as Mengji and Dule all sent embassies to the Han court to pay tribute, which is a typical action of this time. That of course the kingdoms come to the Chinese court. This you find is a frequent description in the Chinese chronicles. So even Menche and Dule. And it has been discussed whether this somehow should be combined together and resembling the Chinese spelling of Macedonia, Manchu, Dule, Macedonia. But this is all but true. So probably not, but this is discussed in research, because frequently they have the problem to identify the different kingdoms and to really locate them. Interestingly, there is also the attempt to reach Rome at this time. So Gan Ying embarking on a mission to Dajing, which is the name given to Rome, the Great Rome, and then he arrives in the region of the Parthians and wants to sail further to Dajing, whether really Rome or Egypt, this is under discussion. And then he wants to prepare the journey and asks the sailors of the western border of Anchi, saying to him, oh, it's too far away, it takes too much time, it is very dangerous. And then he gives up this attempt to reach Dajing. Whether this is really true or just a topical description is we can discuss, but you see that there is at least an attempt to reach direct contacts, but it doesn't happen. And of course, the Parthian sailors have not much interest in getting direct contacts, because then they would lose part of their trade activities. So here you have the reconstruction of this journey of the group around Titianos. So going to the east via a certain Silk Road region. We will not discuss this further, but that you see that already very early they tried to map this down. And then you have, of course, the idea that the silk must somehow come to the west. So the question is, first, where are the spots located that the silk can come to the west? And of course, the second question is, in what form does silk come to the west? Because we can have silk yarn, so the threads, in fact, you can have the silk floss, and of course, you can already have the silk clothes, the textiles. And this is now a very interesting research going on, not by me, but a student, Wang Zhaoyu, studying with Federico de Romanis in Rome, studying how these silk trade functioned and preparing his PhD thesis on that topic. He gave a lecture at our institute sometime before this year and showed us this very nice map, how this might have functioned. And this goes back to the so-called Periplus Maris Erythrae. The Periplus Maris Erythrae is a description of trade spots and trade activities happening in the Red Sea region. It dates to the middle of the 1st century AD, so really also in the time where our most sources come from, also Pliny, for instance, and it gives us very much details about what is traded at the different spots. And now, of course, there is the idea which spots, which harbors are the ones where the Chinese silk and in whatever form is traded to the West. Yeah, if you see these different passages, I have selected 4 of them. I think these are all that talk about silk. Shortly have a look at the bold marked passages. Is it everywhere the same silk that is traded? Shortly have a look at it and then maybe you can answer this question. Who is eager and motivated to say, is it everywhere the same silk being traded? No, huh? Can you say something about?
I think no, because we different silk to different things. Even though you silk yarn and silk cloth is the same, so you have to use it different. It's not the same.
Yes. So first of all, there is of course some problem always with the adjectives, seriki or serikon, how this relates to the different terms being used. This is more grammatical problem, so to say, but we see that at different places, different forms of silk are traded. So at Shruse, we will locate this soon. It said that silk floss, silk yarn, and silk cloth are traded. While at other places, harbor called Barbaricon, we have Chinese pelts and Chinese cloth and yarn. So silk cloth and silk yarn. At Barigasa, silk cloth and silk yarn. And Nelkunda and Bakare, obviously only silk cloth, if we add silk here. So there seems to be different kind of trade connections to the West, where silk in different forms comes to the West. And this is now very interesting, since one can ask the question, how was it prepared for the trade? Was it only the yarn or only the floss, and whether it was later woven by intermediaries, so people being the middlemen into silk cloth, or did it come to the West only as silk yarn and silk floss, and then was woven into silk textiles? This is ongoing research, but I just wanted to mention this, since I think this is a very important topic to think about. So you see here, unfortunately only in Greek, but I think most of you can read it, the different regions where the silk is traded. So I may use here this. So here in the Lemuriki region, it is traded. So only the silk cloth, it was said. Then we have here Barigaza, which says it's only this silk cloths and silk yarn, I think. And then here further there is Barbaricon, where also silk cloth only is traded. And all here it said that all three different kind of silk, so silk yarn, silk floss, and silk textiles are traded. So this seems to be very important to differentiate. Now, we heard already that silk came for the ancients from a tree somehow. And interestingly, the knowledge about silk needs really some time to come into the mind of the people. And this you can notice if you look here to the etymological work of Isidore of Seville. He has still, in some passages, the idea that the series have the trees where the silk floss is somehow combed. So in the 9 to 40, you see the series have acquired their name from their own town, the race situated in the east, among whom wool from the trees is woven. So he really has this old idea of silk coming from the trees. Or in the other passage, Ceres is an eastern town from which both the Seric nation and region get their name, and the fleeces are carded. So it's somehow coming from the plants. But in another passage, where he talks about the silk yarn, he clearly has already the idea that it's not, that silk comes from the tree, but that it comes from the silkworms. It is called sericum, so the yarn is called seric yarn, because the Ceres were the first to export it. They say that the worms are born there, by which these threads are wrapped around trees. So that he tries here to combine the different knowledge about silk coming from the worms, but then the silk threads are worn around the trees. Now, this kind of knowledge about China, which you hopefully saw is somehow very topical, continues if we go into the Renaissance age. This afternoon, we will hear very much about the impact of missionaries on China on the one hand, but also how knowledge was transferred through these missionaries from the east to the west and vice versa. And one very often forgotten work for this is Giovanni Pietro Maffei's Historiae Indicae, so the Indian history, being first published in 1585, I think, or 88, and being commissioned by the Portuguese ruler at this time, who wanted to collect all the knowledge about this mission to the eastern region, to India, but also then to China. Giovanni Pietro Maffei collected the different letters having been written by missionaries, but also trade merchants, and wrote then about the different regions in different chapters. This work has not been translated yet into English, also not to German. I don't know about other languages, but it's not very much in the mind of the people, but it is really a very good Latin, being very close to classical times. And I will shortly tell you a bit about these passages here, so that you know which kind of topics were somehow classical topics in the mind of the people at that time, and then how it was constantly updated, so that the new knowledge also was anchored into this. So let's have a look at this, and I'm sure that you can all understand the Latin very well, but I will translate it, parts of it shortly to you. So first he starts in the 6th book, which is about China, about the region of the Chinese people, which is called China, in Vulgus, in vulgar language. And you see the description at the first is very much close to what we already saw in Pomponius Mela. It's the Ultima Terrarum Asiae, so the very last one in the east. And of course, it's somehow located between the different oceans to the north and to the south. And India is in the Occident. So it's somehow located in the middle. So there are the Massagetais, the Scythians, somehow framing the Chinese. Now it's very interesting that he talks about the gains, how great the Chinese people have ruled this region. So that they have once ruled a very larger region is attested in the annals of them and in the writings, but also by the many monuments of old buildings, and which are really also spread into India, where also different nationes, where different nations have been nominated by the Chinese. But because at this time of the Ming Dynasty, somehow luxury and so exhausted them, and then he compares it interestingly with the Carthaginians, having been conquered by Rome. They wanted to restrict luxury and decided that the Chinese traders shall stay inside their smaller territory, and that there was an edict that no one shall go outside unless it was allowed by the different magistrates. So this points to the policy during parts of the Ming Dynasty that there shall be no free trade to outside. And then he talks very much about the products that have been somehow traded and are available in China, oryza, rice, and so on, all the different kind of grain which are available there. And they also have a very interesting way of preparing the wine. So they mix the wine grapes with condimenta, so with kind of spices, and preserve it for the winter times. And then, of course, they also have a herb which they make in a hot way, which is called cha, the tea. which they drink in a hot way, just like the Japanese. So it also has some chapter about the Japanese. And this is very good because it prevents all the different kind of illnesses which appear in the West, in Europe. So he compares China as a kind of paradise where everything is available, with Europe, especially Portugal and other regions where everything is declining at his time, according to his thoughts. Then he talks about all the metals being available, and you see that there is even the mentioning of porcelain being somehow made here, vasa fictilia, so vases being produced which are called porcelain, and of course then also the different kind of wools, among them the sericifila, so the silk yarn being produced there. He further mentions that then all the different textiles are also made in different colors by using different plants, so that you get a red color, green color, and so on, according to the needs. And even moschus is mentioned, which is said of being coming from a kind of animal which is heavily beaten, so that it produces this moschus perfume. So that's his idea about China being a paradise where everything is available and all these goods somehow contribute to a happy society. So not very much different from the old descriptions we have. And he has this in mind, just shortly, because of the trade activities of the Portuguese at this time, of course, being located in the south of China, nowadays Macau, starting all the activities therefrom, where also, of course, the missionary activities took place. And this is now the last point of my talk, going to a work of Nicolas Trigaud, De Christiana Expeditione Apucinas, so the Christian expedition to China, where he in fact translates material of the Jesuit Pater Matteo Ricci into Latin, because this only survived. This only was written in Italian, but it was made available by his translation to a huge audience in Europe. So it's a bit later than the work of Maffei, but it's really based on the experience of Matteo Ricci and also Nicolas Trigaud, who have been in China and have experienced the life. Matteo Ricci described all the habits and all the different religious activities, but also the trade activities of the Chinese in his time, being sent there to missionize the the Chinese people to become Christians, and exercising a kind of framework that's called the accommodation. So thinking that the Confucian thoughts somehow help to make the Chinese become Christians. And I have just selected one last passage which I want to show to you, where you can see that again, the description is it's the most remote empire to the east, and it is known in Europe under very different names. And then he starts again into the history of ancient times. In the very ancient times, in Ptolemy's record, it's called Sina. We have seen this. Then Marco Polo Veneto from Venice has called it Katai. but then the Lusitanis, the Portuguese, have it called China, and then he talks a bit about the pronunciation, so that the Spanish pronunciation is a bit different than the Italian pronunciation, so China or China, China or China, and in the following he discusses then again why he thinks that China is also close to Ceres. You see, there are these two different terms, but now he discusses why this must be related together, because he says, nil etiam dubitarim, so I have no doubt that this is the same region called also the Cerican region. And then he says, because the Chinese people export the silk, and that it is so successful that it is traded also to Japan and India and also the Philippines. The Spanish people in the Philippines, they traded, so it really has become a globalized trading good at this time. And it says at last, et apparet ex hoc regno in reliquam Asiam, nostram pro Europam, imo et Africam it genus opifici transmigrasse. So that it started to be spread in Asia, then came to Europe, and then even to Africa. It has been traded so that it has spread all over the world. Matteo Ricci, as I told you, has written this work in Italian, then it was translated. And very interestingly, if one studies the tombstones of the Jesuit missionaries that are still present nowadays in Beijing, Matteo Ricci's ones, or in Macau, one can see that this not only left very much impact on the West, how the West viewed China, but that also this left a strong impact on China. Because if we read the tombstone, which is written in Latin and in Chinese, as you can see here in a very bad photograph, I must admit, this translation is Father Matthew Ricci, Italian from Macerata, professed in the Society of Jesus, in which he lived for 42 years, of which he spent 28 in the Sacred Campaign in China. There he was the first to build houses for the brothers, as the Christian faith was introduced for the first time. Having achieved fame through his teaching in his virtue, he died in Beijing in the year of Christ 1610 on May the 11th, 59 years of age. It's really so composed also like a poem. And he was not only translating the Chinese customs and habits to the West, but he was also the one translating very many ancient works to the Chinese people into Chinese, since he was fluent in Chinese. With this, I'm at my end, but I want shortly to say that you see how important it is to know about these perspectives, because these perspectives somehow are also nowadays in our mind. It's far away. We have certain kind of stereotypes about people living in the West or living in the East in China, and that we must overcome this by really getting in contact. And I'm very grateful that we are here today. We can get into contact, can get into exchange to see how these perspectives are and how we have to research them, but also to overcome such very strict and rigid perspectives to see how really China is, how really Europe is, how really Spain and Barcelona is. And I thank you very much that you listened to me, and now the floor is open for any kind of questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Günther. It was a wide, speeding panorama, and we are very thankful that you have got it in the short time. And I had forgotten to tell you, we from the room we can ask obviously, but if anyone in the online should want to ask anything, may use the chat facility. Are there any questions in the floor? Please.
I have a question. How to define a series? Was it a dynasty, a country, or just a special group of the people?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I just repeated for the Zoom audience, because probably they couldn't hear you, how to define the series. Is it really the people? Is it a certain kind of territory? Or how can we grasp it? And yeah, as you saw from the different descriptions, there is not very a clear idea which the ancient people have about the series. So they are usually grouped together with the Indians, and this makes them somehow being close to them. And you saw also in the geographical descriptions, but more is not known. So they are people, series, but that's a very normal Latin description. Any kind of ancient people are described naming them in the plural, but sometimes it's grouped together with natio, with a nation, but this seems to be much more depending not on detailed knowledge, but on just imagination how they should be organized. So there is no mentioning of the political system. There is no mentioning of the emperor or so in these descriptions. It's just a kind of, yeah, these are far distant people. They must be then somehow exotic in a way that they have everything, that they live like in a paradise, that they have this very special trading goods, the silk. This is surely known, but any clear information about how their life is organized, how the society is organized, is very much based on topoi. It's very much based on, okay, we imagine it, it must be like this. This is, I think, what the ancients know about. And the first knowledge, or more detailed knowledge, then comes in these writings from the Jesuits, where we get more details about how the society is organized. So there, in the writings of Giovanni Pietro Maffei, but also in Matteo Ricci's writings, we have very detailed descriptions about the customs, how the dinner party takes place, how the magistracy is organized, how the system of bureaucracy and the examination of bureaucrats, the mandarins, is organized. So there we know very much. But in ancient times, it seems to be, okay, it's far away. We imagine it to be a good society because they bring us this luxury good, and all other things are somehow topical, so they can be used for the Seres people, but it can also be used for any other people, the Indians or the Swedes. So nothing special, so to say.
The second question, can I say that the series important resource as for connecting the eastern country and the western country?
In ancient times, you mean, or in this Renaissance times? Yeah. So in ancient, yeah. So the question was whether the Seres people play an important role as a bridge between the East and the West in ancient times, or also in modern times. Yeah, in ancient times, as I said, it's more like, it's very much far away. There is trading, there are goods which somehow come, but it's not really that we have close contacts to the population. So in Augustan times, it's imagined, okay, it's so far away, but nevertheless, they submit to the Emperor Augustus, surely this was not the case. So this is just an imagination again, but it's also not like a bridge where you have frequent contact to. We know of other writings or from other writings that there were possibly some contacts in Antonine times to the Chinese court, but whether this was an official delegation or these were just merchants claiming to come from the Roman emperor, it's very much unsure, because the record is not so detailed that we can really know this, and researchers are divided whether this was an official embassy or whether this was just merchants claiming to come from the Roman emperor as diplomats. So in fact, what the Western view is that they provide everything with the goods, especially the textiles. Pliny also mentions metal being somehow transported or being somehow traded to the West, but it has not really a function as a bridge. So I would say if one wants to define a bridge between East and West, this would be the Parthians for the Romans. So the Parthian Empire being on the one hand the very enemy of the Romans, but being much more also used as a bridge to the East. And because they don't, as they are usually described, the Parthians, as being not very active, but that they are very good in organizing that people trade through their territory, because then they can get some custom taxes, custom dues. So they would be the bridge somehow. And we had a project about which Elizabeth will talk shortly after me, where Parthia, we set into the core of the ancient Silk routes, because very much goes, of course, via Parthia. And in the Renaissance time, you see how the picture emerges that China really plays a key role, not so much between East and West, but being somehow integrated into the globalized economy. So the last passage I showed to you from Matteo Ricci's writings, translated by Nicolas Trigot, really shows, okay, China is now a very important point, together with Japan and the Philippines, in a globalized economy where everything is somehow linked with each other. But this kind of globalized and interconnected economy, this perspective you do not have in many writings of ancient times. This is really something new, I would say. Yeah. Important factor. Yeah, the question was about the language of the series, or how the ancient people, also the Renaissance missionaries, dealt with the language. So for the ancient times, we do not have really a record about this. So you saw that there is a so-called silent trade, which might be somehow a kind of topos being used because they couldn't really understand the language, but it's all but true, because we don't know how intensive the contacts were. In the Chinese records, we have, of course, the mentioning that they have contacts, that they send embassies, at least the Anchi, the Parthian people, and obviously they could understand each other. And we have other records in Chinese historians, what about the different languages in the region, that they are sometimes similar with each other and sometimes different. So obviously there was a clear knowledge about, let's say, up to the Persian Empire, that there are languages, different kind of, and that somehow one can learn these languages. But for the Roman sources, we don't know very much how they viewed this. Then we must ask the question, can we really imagine that someone goes unprepared to the east or the west? I don't think so. Of course, no? They knew which kind of languages are spoken. They have, and this we know of, they had, of course, somehow translating diplomatic conversations into the one or the other language. So we have interpreters. We also have them in the inscriptional, also epigraphic records, but we don't have it for the East. We know it very much from the West. So especially in the military sphere, we have interpreters translating for the Romans into the different languages of the Gaulish people or the Germanic people. So there is some record for this. And we must imagine that this also happens, of course, when it goes to the East. For the Renaissance time, both Giovanni Pietro Maffei and Matteo Ricci describe the Chinese language. So for Giovanni Pietro Maffei, it's a bit more simple, the description, I would say. He compares the Chinese characters with Egyptian hieroglyphs, which is very normal at this time. So they try to think how does the Chinese characters function, and they try to describe this. But Matteo Ricci has a very detailed report about the language because he learned by himself. So Matteo Ricci was in China, he learned the language, and then he translated also Latin works, Italian works into Chinese and vice versa. But for Giovanni Pietro Maffei, shortly before, he didn't learn. So he just described it as being something exotic. And when you describe something as being exotic, you try, of course, to compare it with other exotic things, you know. And that's why he compared it then with the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, then we would finish our first talk now, and without any interruption, then I thank you very much, Professor Günther, and I would ask Dr. Günther, Elisabeth Günther, to come to the table. Thank you very much. Oh, while Dr. Elisabeth Günther looks for the link and establishes and finds the link to the university in Germany, in Trier, I would like to introduce her to you. Dr. Günther is assistant professor now at the Department of Classical Archaeology at the Trier Treveris University in Germany. Dr. Günther studied classical archaeology, classical philology, and biology. I must repeat, it's not very usual in our terms. At the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, in Maguncia. Her research focuses on ancient iconography and theoretical methodological approaches, reception studies, ambiguities, frame and affordance theories in different objects, and her PhD was about Italian vase paintings and the imaginary and the Roman imperial period. She works also on application of digital methods to the analysis of ancient objects and images. The management team for this meeting, we are very thankful to Dr. Günther for attending the talk today. She is speaking about Hercules going east. transformations and iconographies along the Silk Roads. We are convinced that you will enjoy her approach, in which the conjunction of distant but complementary methodological perspectives should not surprise us. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Odunya, for your kind introduction. I have to say it is a great pleasure and also an honor for me to talk to you today, and that I'm allowed to be part of this workshop. And just as my husband Sven had said before, I would very much like to thank the organizers for inviting me. And I also would like to add a personal comment to thank Professor Odunya and also Professor Remesal Rodriguez for their warm hospitality, and that this stay is really a very exceptional stay here in Barcelona for us. So we very much enjoy to be here, I have to say. Yeah, so what will I talk about now? So Professor Odunya has already told you that our topic today is Hercules, especially Hercules, somehow going east. So I think, Anna, I'm already sharing this.
Yes, we have, you are already sharing this, but we will some smaller. Yeah. Yeah, and then. Could be okay. Okay.
Yes, that's perfect. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. What will we do today? So first of all, I would like to talk a bit or discuss a bit with you about the iconography of Heracles and how this iconography changes in the East. And so before I start, I wanted to ask especially the students here who has already something to do in their studies with iconography. So maybe you can raise your hand so I know who of you knows a bit about iconography. Okay, so at least one I have seen. And so this is only one part we want to do today. So the other part is that I would like to show you how we can visualize something like East and Western exchange, changing iconographies and so on in a kind of interactive map, so kind of online exhibition. So I also would like to ask the students, who of you in your studies had already to do something with an interactive map, or maybe was creating an online exhibition? So not so many also, okay. So I hope that my talk today can give you some ideas, maybe also for your own interests and how you can work with that. At least I very much hope so. I guess we should start with Hercules, because not all students here are maybe so familiar with Hercules. So Hercules is one of very important gods, or you should maybe rather say demigods or half gods in the Greek mythology. So Heracles was a son of Jupiter or Zeus, so the highest god in the pantheon, but his mother was mortal, so he was a half god. And during his life, he did many important things. So among them also the so-called 12 labors. So he had to solve 12 important duties to do. And he was very successful with that. And in the end, he was accepted among the gods. So you can imagine that someone who was a half god in the beginning and later a god is kind of interesting person to deal with. Is something you can really look up to him, and also his labors. So you see some of them here. He really had to deal with a lot of dangerous creatures. How can I use the laser light? Do you know that? No, okay, I'm not sure, but I don't do something. Ja, aber wie heißt es auf Spanisch? Yeah.
Go back.
It's okay. Yeah, I think this is also a solution. So you see here the 12 labors, and they are all very dangerous creatures, and he was able to kill them. So he very much helped the people of this time. And the first creature he had to deal with is the Nemean lion. So this is a very important one. And we also already find in the Greek vase paintings you see it here on the left, a black figure from the 6th century BC. We see depictions of that. Yeah, so you see here Heracles fighting with the lion, and he really, because the lion has a skin, you cannot harm. Yeah, so he really has to kill him with his hands. Yeah, and later Heracles wears the skin of the lion as a part of his armor. And on the right you see a Roman copy of such a Greek statue of Heracles, the Heracles Farnese, and he holds the skin, the lion skin, together with the club. So the club is one of his typical arms, and also the bow and the quiver. So he has some, some attributes, some objects, something he carries with him that makes it quite easy for us to identify Heracles. And he does not only appear in statues and so on, but also on the coinage. So in Hellenistic times, we find Alexander disguised as Heracles, but also later Roman commanders, and also especially the Emperor Commodus, who was a very special person. He also dressed up as Heracles. And this means that on the one side, these persons used this glamour of Heracles to stage themselves. But of course, there was also a connection to Alexander. So when Commodus dressed up as Heracles, there's also a reference to Alexander. So you see that Heracles is very widespread, and there's also there were also temples for Heracles. There's a lot of iconography. So Heracles appears nearly everywhere in the Greek and Roman culture, especially in the Roman culture. And so for us, it is maybe not surprising that we also find him if we look a bit more to the east. So Sven has already shown to you some maps. So this is a very simple map of the Silk Roads. And you have already heard that the Silk Road is not only one road, but is many roads, many different trade routes spreading from Europe, from the Near East to the Middle East to the Far East. And as you can imagine, a lot of different cultures are involved. And it's not the case that one person travels from one end to the other, but all the cultures along the Silk Road are partially responsible for some trade. And this is also very interesting to see how the material culture then is also influenced by this trade between West and East. So if we now want to follow Heracles somehow traveling along the Silk Roads, I already said it would be nice to have some visualization, like this online exhibition. And for this, there's one tool which is very handy and also very nice to use. It is called Omeka. Omeka is freeware, so you can use this freely if you have your own server. So maybe you need some IT person to help you, but it's also very easy to use. And we used it during a seminar with the students, and it was a very successful application of this. So I will show you the tool, and then we will talk about Heracles, and then in this live session, we will create a small exhibition together. And I will try to handle it with Zoom. Okay, so this is our server we set up in our seminar. So this seminar was also about the Silk Road, and in this Silk Road seminar, we also collected all different kinds of sources along the Silk Roads. So we'll now share with you the Omeka page. So this is this program called Omeka, and you see here the dashboard, so the very beginning. And you can see that you can create different things like items. I will quickly or later explain to you. Items are like the very basic entries into the database, and you can then use these core entries to create a map and also an interactive map with the tool Neatline. So this is exactly what we will do later. But I quickly wanted to show you the exhibition we were doing in our seminar. So you can see here that we have created different websites, and you can click through the websites and find some more information. And you can here insert also some images. And if you click on the images, then you can read some further information. So you can link different kind of information very well with each other. You can link texts and videos and images and podcasts and whatever you like. So I think this is a very interesting tool. And if you have questions about this tool, I can also explain to you later how you might use this. Okay, let's jump back into the slides. So I would like to start with this. This wonderful piece. So I would like to ask you to have a look at this special object. And I'm very curious if one of you maybe would like to say something what he sees here. So there's nothing wrong to say, but maybe you can let us know about your impression of this. What do you see here?
The left figure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know English.
The club. Yeah.
And the other figures, I'm not sure. They are not
yeah, a crown or a halo it is here. Yeah, some radiance of the other three figures we see here. Yeah, they are not very known to us because they are also not from the Western Greco-Roman iconography. But this relief was indeed found in Palmyra, so in the Near East. And maybe you can also already see the stylistic features because they are quite different. No? So if you think of the Heracles Phoenicia I showed you, he's very relaxed, or shown in a natural way. And here all these figures are shown very frontally. So we could say somehow stiff. Yeah? And they have a strange cloth, and they have a halo. And the figure in the middle is, yes, exactly. It's a moon crescent. Yeah. Here's a moon crescent, the other have only a halo, and you can also see that this here is a female figure because she wears a long dress, and the others are male figures. And you rightly said here, the figure on the left, this is Heracles because of the lion skin and the club. You can also see the beard, yeah? And maybe you also see another important difference between this Heracles and the other figures. An idea what could be another important difference. Very basic difference. Yeah, exactly. So he's naked, yeah, and the other ones are all dressed. And I also think there's another interesting difference in the way, in the posture of them, so how they are standing there. Can you also there detect difference? So maybe you, if you have first a look at Heracles, so how is Heracles standing? How's he moving his body? Yes, exactly. So he's turning to the others. Yeah, you can see it clearly. He's here. The other part is quite frontal, but here he's turning his body, while the other figures are only frontal. So this is also kind of Greek element or Greek Roman element. You see here that the figure is also moving in a different way. So already here we have a lot of different elements between Greco-Roman and local style, this Palmyran style. And the figures you see here, these Palmyran figures, they are Palmyran gods, probably moon and sun god, and also another god who cannot be identified here. But let's say they are local gods. So let us take this as a first example to start traveling with Heracles here. And I would like now to show you how we can transfer this information into our database to create later the interactive map. So I have, of course, already collected the information, so we can speed up a little bit. So you see here, I have gathered the most important information that we should have in a database. So for archaeologists, it is, for example, important to know something about the material, the measures, the size, the question of the provenience, but also in which museum it is today. And you see this in Damascus. So it will be hard to see it in the original today. And it was found in Palmyra under the Baal temple, and it was used in a well as a spolia. So this means it was used in another way before and later used in this well. So we don't know exactly how it was used. And it is from the 1st century BC. And I also provided a small description and also a georeference point for you. So if we want to use this for the database, we can just go back to the website here and go to the items. So the items are the basic entries, and we can here create a new entry. And I have to admit that I have, of course, also prepared this for you. So I think otherwise maybe we will need too much time here. So if you want to add a new item, I have now added it, but if you want to edit it, you can just say add item, and you see that there are a lot of different element sets you can fill with information. So you can give it a title, for example, relief depicting Heracles and Palmyranian gods. You can then add also some more information about the object itself. Here, the description. So I provided also a description about the iconography we have quickly talked about, and the creator, so the name of the person who created the entry. And you can also give some more information about the date. Date range is, of course, important. And also the right. So if you use a photo in an online exhibition, you must, of course, first of all, check whether you can use the photo, because it is not always allowed. So the right to use the photo might be under Creative Commons license, and then you are allowed, but you always have to refer to the website where you have the photo from. So these are all important information, and you can say then, okay, you can save it. And if you go to view public page, you get an impression how it will look later. How it will look later, and then you can see the layout, and you can see that all the information we have added in this into the database will now appear in this way here in our exhibition later. Okay, now we go back. No, we don't go back. I want to show you also the neat line, because we don't only create the item entries in the database, but we also want to create the map. We should not forget about the map. So how to do this map? There's one, it is called plugin. So this is kind of extension of the program called Neatline. And in Neatline, you can add your own small exhibition. So you see that there are already several ones. that have been created here, but we want to create our own exhibition, of course. So first of all, we should give it a title. So maybe Heracles going east is not bad. And you see that then here appears a URL. Like this will be the one that appears later in your web browser when you open the website. You can give it a narrative. This is not necessary now. This is a description of the exhibition. And you need some, we will need some widgets. So we want to create a timeline. So we should use the timeline widget and also maybe the waypoints. And then you can say something about the map. So we will use now the OpenStreetMap because this is a free map that will be in the background later. And you can also put everything public, but now I think it's not the right time to put everything into the web. So we will now keep a private, so to say, version of it. And if you say save exhibit, then you can click on it. And then you can, sorry, this is the test one. This is, of course, already finished. Where is it? And save exhibit. Let's see. Problem, URL like might only exist once. So now we have our own in the second one. Thank you so much. Perfect. There's also the other one here. Okay, then maybe we delete this one because we won't need it. Okay, and you see, this is now the exhibition, and there is still something to do, yeah, because we are here in somewhere in Africa. We don't need Africa, and also in the timeline we are now in the 21st century. So this is also not so perfect for us. So what we can do now is to use a default map focus. This means that we can just zoom into the map and say we want to use the current viewpoint, and this will be then our map later. And we can also go to plugins and choose the timeline, and then we can say something about the timeline. For example, we want to have a default date. This might be maybe the 1st January in the year 100. And if we save that, you see that it jumps directly into the year 100. And instead of the interval unit of a year, this is a bit not useful for us. We choose the centuries. And now we have a nice timeline to begin with our exhibition. But we still need some entries, right? So we have the map, the timeline, but we don't have any objects here. So what we do is we go into the record and we say we want to create a new record. And the first record should maybe be our relief with the Heracles. So Palmyrenian, yeah. And we can add here an item. And this means that now we can link the map with our database. So this is very useful. So as you know, we have already created the item, and then you have here all the information about it, and you can say save. So now we have added one item, but there's still something to do because we have to add it to the timeline. So for understand, we have to say, okay, we want it to be a part of the timeline. And then we also have to say, of course, a start date. Yeah, so I told you it's the 1st century BC. So the start date could be 100 BC. And if you enter a date BC, you must always use here this 6 numbers. So let's try whether this works. No, I guess it's a bit too long. Then we say it's the first of the year. Something like this one. Okay, then I end in number 3. Oh, sorry, this is really the showing effect. So now it is set here in the timeline into the 1st century BC. But we still need, of course, here, no, it is already here also set into the map, because in our item, I have already saved here the coverage. So this is the geolocation. It is exactly the Baal temple in Palmyra. And now this was also transferred into this map. So we have already created our first entry of this nice exhibition. So I will go now back to the slide, because there are also some more things to add. Because we have also some other objects we would like to add to our exhibition, and it is this person here. So who would like to say something what he or she can see on this picture? So there's no wrong answer. So be brave. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It seems like he's watching something.
Yeah.
Like the words he does is like powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Has power, control to someone or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why do you think he has power or control?
Because of his voice, the way that he was wherever he's watching.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's watching
the face. It's like I have power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first impression might be this is a powerful man reclining here, and you're right. No? So he's looking into the sky somehow, no?
Yeah.
Into the far away. So he seems to look around. And what do you think is the environment of this statue?
The size.
The size?
Yes.
So the length is approximately 1 meter. Yeah, see also some ideas here. Okay, yeah, so it's a bit edgy, yeah, and maybe if you look a bit where it seems to be in a rock, right? No, so it is a rock relief. Yeah. It is carved into a rock somewhere in the landscape. Yeah. And it's in, yeah.
The rock is drawn something. Like
yeah.
All in mass.
Yeah.
I think it's our.
Yeah, exactly here. Yeah, this is a stele. No? So it is a kind of inscription that seems to be set up behind him. So we will quickly look at it. And also maybe you recognize this thing here.
I don't see the mask. Look very like
die andere Perspektive der Ausbildung hier. Das wird viel zu groß gezeigt.
Okay, ja.
Ja, hier.
Here better? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one here. This is again the club. No? So this weapon of Heracles. You see also a bow and a quiver. and he's kind of lying here, but he holds something in his hand. Yeah, exactly. No, it's a bowl. No? So what he's doing here, he's reclining to drink something. So like a feast is happening here.
Resting,
Mhm.
something with a drink.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No? And if we have a look at the inscription, you can see it's a Greek inscription here, but it's found in Iran. No? It's a valley in Iran, but we have a Greek inscription here. And it says that a certain person who was a hero commander set up this kind of the statue for a satrap, so one of the Parthian rulers. So he was a Seleucid Greek, yeah, who was responsible for this era, and he set it up for the Persians. So you already see that the Persians have a lot of influence here, also a military influence, and that this Heracles, he's called Heracles Kallinikos, so the victorious Heracles, that this here refers to a military victory. So it's a monument for military victory that also combines the Greek style of Heracles, but here also with the setup in Iran. And maybe if you're a bit more acquainted with the style, you can see maybe this is also what you meant, this strength, so that his body posture is very strong, is very broad, and this seems also to be some of the local style used here. And we also know from which year it is, because it is said that it is set up in the year 164 in the Seleucid era, which is the year 148 BC. So we have here again a dating, and we can then also use this to create an entry in our database. So we can say, okay, it's a relief. Now it is cut in a rock. The length is 1 or 1.5 meter. It is set up in Iran, and it's from the 2nd century BC. And then we can also insert the other information. We won't do this now because of the time frame, but I have already prepared this for you. Instead of switching to the Omeka exhibition, I would now, I would like now with you to look at this bowl. Maybe we can see it better in the big size. Yes, I think we can see it better here. It is a bit more complicated, this bowl, but maybe you can recognize also Heracles in this environment. Do you have an idea which figure could be Heracles here? Yes, exactly. So we have a man with a club. You mean this one, right? Yeah, you're right. This is Heracles. So he's sitting on a chair. He's holding a club. And again, what is also, could you compare also with the other depictions of Heracles? Yes. So again, he's naked. And yeah. He's bearded, yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing in this bowl here, and this is a bowl from the 6th, 7th century, so much later, and found in Perm. You can see that there's also another figure here, which is also naked, so also resembles Heracles. And this figure kills together with another one a boar. So this reminds of the Erymanthean boar that was one of the labors of Heracles. And here it is used also in this very special setup. And but it is not Heracles himself, but it is another figure who kills the boar here. So there's some change somehow in this story. And if you look again at the sitting Heracles to his right, there's a man, and this man is raising his left hand, stretching out 2 fingers. So this is a kind of speaking gesture. So he seems to talk to him. Kind of Greek figure. So it is not sure who it should be, but somehow it reminds a bit of a Greek philosopher here talking with Heracles. And there are a lot of other interesting figures that are mixed here. There are also on the other side, you see a couple, so it's better shown in the figure on the right. So it's a man and a woman. They are also reclining, they're drinking something out of a cup, and there are also people coming to bring new wine and so on. And if you look at their clothes, it's totally different. They are not naked, they are dressed up, but they are also dressed up in a very specific Oriental way. So they are definitely from a different cultural background. And there are also two other very funny figures on the right of the couple. There are two monkeys. So maybe you can see two monkeys who play musical instruments. So this is also another level of this, yeah, let's say dinner, yeah, a kind of funny or also mythical dinner. And if you think of the Greek mythology, there's also a story about Heracles who had to catch the Kerkopis, and the Kerkopis are also monkey-like figures. So one may think about whether here also there's an influence from the Greek myth to that. And you can compare this style, the dress of these two figures of this couple with the coins from the 6th century from the Heptalites. So they were nomadic, nomadic people living in Asia, and they lived in the Bactrian area, and this very much resembles them. So the researchers think that maybe this couple is also a Heptalite couple, and the bowl itself might remind us of Megarial bowls. So these are kind of ceramic that was very widespread in the Hellenistic Greek times. So also this might have influenced this bowl. So you see that there are a lot of different influences in this cup. And it was found here in the area of Bactria. So this is in the northern Iran region. So we have now gone quite far to the east. But in our very last example, we will go even more far to the east with this depiction here. So I would now like to invite you to have a look at also this image. So what do you think is shown here in this image? Yeah. Yeah. You mean on the right, no? There are two men, they're somehow kneeling before this figure in the middle. And who could be this figure in the middle? So maybe someone who knows something a bit about a Chinese or East Asian iconography or religion. Yeah, exactly. Huh? It's Buddha sitting here in the middle, and there are two people approaching him. And there's a very strange figure here on the left, and he is also somehow listening to Buddha. Yeah, and he has some interesting features. Yeah, what could be these interesting features? I would like to draw your attention at. Yeah. Yes, exactly. No? So he seems to have a club in his hand. No? So he's leaning on the club. This even reminds us a little bit of the Heracles Farnese. So he is resting here. Is there something else that maybe reminds you of Heracles here? Yes, he has a mustache. No? So he has a kind of beard, small beard, but it is a beard. Yes, yeah. Something else?
Yeah, I would say like three people that are like beside you. Something like it represents like the people that live in the, for example, we have like a flag there.
Yeah.
I think it represents like the Arabian people who live in Buddha, and also we have like the flag, the white women, and I think it represents like Oriental.
Yes, yeah, there's a difference in the skin color. Yeah. In this case, this skin color derives from his work because he's working as a cowherd. So you see, he has 2 cows lying beneath him. Yeah, so usually he's in the field working with the cows. So it's not an educated follower of Buddha like the other ones who are kneeling there, but he's really someone who's working outside. And he's looking at his cows. And you could also see a connection to Heracles with the cows, because there's also some story where Heracles cleans the stable of Augias. So it's also a stable of cows, and he cleans it, and this is also one of the labors. And you see that he also wears a special kind of clothes, so he's dressed in a different way. So the people kneeling, they are neatly dressed in a tunic, but he wears only a very short dress around his waist and also a scarf, which might remind us of the skin of the lion, but it is not a lion skin here. So this painting was found in Western China, in Kisil. Yeah, so we are already here in a very far western, eastern region now. And it is really the question, to what extent can we really say that this is a Heracles here, right? Because on the one side, if we have seen the other images of Heracles before, we can say, okay, there are some elements that might indicate that there is somehow Heracles in the background, but others we cannot say for sure whether this is really reminds or could remind people in this time of Heracles. And what is the concrete background of it is a story about the Coward Nanda. So the Coward Nanda was a very good coward, and he was a very reliable coward for the king. And once when Buddha came to the king also invited the coward and said, join us and listen to Buddha. And the coward listened to Buddha and about the laws that Buddha taught, and then he became a follower of Buddha. So it's a Buddhistic story, but we may think whether it might remind of Heracles or it might not remind of Heracles in this kind. So this is an impression of this cave. So these are very old and Buddhistic caves from the 4th century AD. And inside these caves, there were some statues, but also some wall paintings like the one you have seen now. And this is cave 77. So this is one of these caves in this era. Okay, so let us go into our exhibition. One moment, I have to share the screen. Zoom. So now we are all in Zoom, and we should now also add the other items. So, for example, the one showing the Coward Nanda, we have just seen. We can call it Nanda. And we should also say, okay, this is from the 4th century AD. So it's from 400 approximately. So this is a C14 date of this wall painting. And we should also add the coverage to it, and to the map. Here it already is. I haven't seen it. And then we can also add the next record. Should this be the silver bowl? So this is the silver bowl, and I haven't added geographical location because it is here in Bactria. So I will now add it directly to the map. You can here use the tool to draw an area yourself. So for example, here we can draw a polygon into this region. Save it. Then we can also add the last record, which is the rock relief. And then we also should have the rock relief here. Yes, so now you see that we can already see here the coverage, the geographical coverage, and we should also add the timeline in the widget. And then it should also be added here. This done. I think this takes a bit too much time. This is why I go into my test exhibition now. So we here have a better overview. So you see it's the same geospatial coverage, but here you also get a better impression of the timeline. Yeah, and you can see that that we also have a big time span to cover. So we start in the 1st century BC, so 148 BC, with the rock relief in Iran. We go then to the Palmyrenian relief in the 1st century BC. Later, in the end of the 4th century, we have the painting of the Chinese painting, and then in the 6th to 7th century, we have the silver bowl. And now, of course, since we have now a nice visualization of all the objects we have looked at, to finish the talk, I would like to ask you, the title was Heracles Going East, but can we really say that when we spot all these objects, we can see how Heracles travels east? Can we really see him traveling east, or maybe we can't see him traveling east? What do you think? Yeah.
Traveling east.
Yeah. Yeah, why?
Well, you can see that at the beginning it starts in Greece, but it starts moving or being influential in other parts of the world, which are Greece.
Yes, yeah, so we have a starting point somehow in the Greco-Roman culture, but we also see him in other more Eastern ones. Yeah. What could be used as an argument against to say that we can see him neatly traveling east? Yeah.
If I remember correctly, chronology is going to be with that. Because,
Yes.
one begins in the first one is from Iran.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second one from Syria. So
yes, exactly. No? So if you look at compare the timeline with the geographical location, first of all, it seems to be a linear development, but it isn't. So the objects, at least these 4 I have shown to you, there are many others, but the ones I have shown to you, they pop up in different regions in different times. So it is not a linear development of traveling, but rather we see some, to say, it sheds light on some aspects of this iconography in different regions. This is a very important aspect. What could also be a problem if I say, okay, I want to see Heracles traveling from west to east?
So is it really the Heracles traveling east?
Yes, this one pushes you into the right direction. So what exactly can we grasp here? What do you think? Yeah.
Is it not possible that in the Buddhist picture that it's not Heracles, but Govinda?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
The only element that suggests Heracles is the club.
Yes.
But the coward would be Govinda.
Yeah.
So maybe the Buddhist propaganda appropriated Hinduism.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I'm also critical about that interpretation. Is it really Heracles? Because why might we think that it is Heracles? It is because he has the club, yes. But also, if you think of our own perspective as researcher, what is the problem here?
We're Eurocentric.
We're Eurocentric to some degree, yeah. So alone the question I asked, Heracles traveling east implies that it is always Heracles, that we can always detect Heracles, and the most of us have these frameworks to expect Heracles. And this is why we see Heracles, but it doesn't mean that it was really meant to be Heracles. And I think another important aspect is also that if you look at all these different objects we have seen today, although in many cases we might say, okay, it's nude, it's a bearded man, he is very muscular, he has a bow and so on. So in one case he's even called Heracles, very likely that he is Heracles. It's not that he is without a context. It's always a different cultural context that makes use of this figure in a very certain way, that has its own intentions, its own interests, its own context we could not look at. But especially the bowl, so I love this bowl piece very much, because in this bowl you can really see that different cultural elements come together, but they shape something new. So there's produced something really new, something really attractive, and it is not about to say it is always west and east, but that we can say, okay, something new emerges in this. And yeah, I hope this is also a bit a message to all of us, also a bit like Sven said, not to see west and east, but to see that a lot of different things emerge in between, and that we can also maybe gain new insights also on our own culture we are studying. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Günther. This was a practical exhibition of
experimental
of eventual limitations.
Yeah.
I am sure our friends in the room and online will take advantage of the link to the University of Trier University, and to observe that closer. And well, I would like to ask, are there any questions or any remarks, please?
Like an image, but in a 3D render.
So I don't have a 3D model of these objects now, but if you have one, you can also include it into this kind of exhibition. You can also include any kind of video or other elements, and I think this is also one important aspect. If you look into the future, I think that 3D models will become more and more important, also for teaching and but also for research. And this would also be very interesting to include something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions on yes,
the access to the program, to this Omeka program.
Chat.
The chat,
Yeah.
yes. Yes. The address.
Amadou Viana is asking. Oh, we're very sad. But,
yes. So the exhibition I showed now is not public on the web, so you cannot watch it without signing in like I did. But you can have, if you're interested in the program, especially, you can look for Omeka, and you can see some further examples, how this tool is used also by other institutions and other projects to create this kind of exhibitions, map-based exhibitions. It will soon be online. So the exhibition we made in our seminar about the Silk Road, so different sources along the Silk Road, this will be published, and then I would be happy to share the link with you.
We can send it to all participants.
Yes. So I think this will be the address then. I can put it into so this will be later the address, but it's not yet online, so we have to do some preparation still.
Are there any remarks still?
No, I think they had problem with the showing of the. Yes, there's still some potential for the hybrid format to improve, I think. But I hope that at least also the online guests could follow the explanations.
Yes, all right. Well, then, still one. Any questions?
Yeah, maybe one can add that this is a very good way of connecting different institutions, because it was done with the University of Kassel and in China our institute. So it's really a way that you can work on an exhibition together as students and really have exchange also in times when it's not possible to travel, unfortunately. So we can use or make use of these digital tools really to connect researchers and also students in a way which is very productive. I mean, I saw up here, you are all interested, you describe characters, and now imagine you can exchange with Chinese students directly. What do they see? What do they think? And I think this is a huge advantage, the huge potential of such a medium to produce something in the end, producing it together, bringing the different perspectives.
For sure, it's great prospects for exchange in
international way.
In this, yes, there are two German universities already linked in this way, Kassel and Trier, Treveris, and then, as Professor Günther said, then with Changchun, where it has been highly developed, this kind of connections to international linked seminars and meetings. No? Then, well, thank you for the and this will be also delivered to our participants. This
yes. It's not yet public, but it will be public in November or December. So we are doing still some preparations, and we would be very happy, if you had a look at our website, and we could also continue the exchange with you. That would be very wonderful for us.
And to this point is even the opening of opportunities. This is what we are aiming with this meeting. There are opportunities of collaborating with other points in Europe and with points in China in order to engage oneself in new projects. So that we are very happy if you follow these links and then exchange your opinion about this. Thank you. Okay, then we would for the first half of our meeting and end now, and we are going on then at 15:45, 3:45 p.m. We are now, and we will make now a break, and then in 2 hours we are again beginning in the second half of our meeting. Thank you very much for joining us, and well, we hope we meet then. You are invited to follow it, and new participants will come then later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jordi, perdona, és que abans estaven tan embolicat.
No passa res, és que el format híbrid encara és més potent. Respecten més al món virtual, hi ha unes persones que són presencials. Sí, hi havia 20 persones connectades.
Ingreu, no sabut, perquè no hi havia algun problema de compartir l'imatge.
Sona difícil.
Sí.
Vols que deixi la presentació oberta per després no perdre temps?
Jo diria que sí, que la podríem posar, la vols posar ja?
La tinc al correu,
Val.